The gentleman. Have you ever been one of those people who wished they could look young forever? No gray or white hair, crow's feet or wrinkles. Things staying in place where they're supposed to be and not submit to gravity. Alec is one of those people. He decided to look up ways to stay youthful. Among these were all of the natural and medical ways, things he tried and knew wouldn't work. Then, something interesting popped up during his searches from an occult website. It was tilted, wishing for eternal youth. Eternal youth? Alec wanted to look young forever, but eternal youth sounded even better. Being a gentleman in his early 40s, he still wanted to look attractive. Clicking on the link, he read through the blog posts until there was a peculiar one that caught his interest. He honestly thought it was a joke. People with pure hearts have special antibodies in their liver. When it is cooked and eaten, it will give you a youthful appearance. Alec read aloud to himself. This isn't serious, is it? Below, it was an email to contact. Deciding to give it a try, he sent a message expressing his interest. He was surprised when he was answered back within the hour and given an address to go to. Curious, he goes to the location provided, which turns out to be a graffitied food truck set up on a bunch of cinder blocks. A dim light is on inside, and a cloud of white smoke drifts out. A strong smell fills the air, making Alec cover his nose. "You must be the guy," a man cooking on the grill says over his shoulder without turning around. "I'll be done shortly, so have a seat." Alec looks around, spotting 2 wooden picnic tables and sitting at one of them. The area was pretty empty other than the food truck, 2 tables, and a beaten-up blue truck. Surrounding that was a sea of trees. After a while, the man walked up to the Alec, setting down what he'd been cooking in front of him. "There you go. Go ahead and dig in. You want to get younger, don't you?" The man chuckled, watching the other stare at the meat in front of him. It was definitely smaller than an animal's. Picking up the knife and fork, Alec dug in. When he was finished, he looked at the man who owned the food truck. "How do I know if this will work?" he asked. "It takes time, Alec. Something like this won't happen immediately. Go home, get some sleep, and when you wake up and see the results, come back," the man replied. There has to be some kind of trick, Alec thought. Begrudgingly, he agreed and went on his way back home. Tomorrow morning, he'd check to see if this occult trick was worth it. Early morning, Alec awoke and began to get his day started. He made his cup of coffee and then went to take a shower. He placed his cup down to wash his face before stepping into the shower and raised his head, peering into the mirror. When he saw his reflection, a surprised sound escaped his lips. He couldn't believe it. Alec indeed looked younger. Even the skin on his hands was smooth. They weren't extreme changes, but the traces of age were gone. By the time he was dressed, Alec had made up his mind to go see that man again, so he sent him another email. This time he was told a different location and time. He agreed and went to meet up with him. It was an old apartment building and looked to have seen better days since the outside had siding barely hanging on, and the grass was unkempt. Walking up the creaking staircase, he knocked on apartment number 13. There was a rustling inside, a sound of a click, and the door opened. "Good, you came," the man smiled ear to ear. "Yes, I was wondering if there was any way that I could procure another," Alec asked. "If that is what you wish, then step inside, Alec," the man replied, letting Alec in, then closed the door. The man led him further inside to a room covered in clear plastic tarps. and in the center on a table was a young woman. He picked up a scalpel and turned it over in his hands, noticing Alec had gone stiff. If I had more time, then I would have prepared it for you. But I was thinking, since you were so interested in becoming young again, why not let you in on the process? The man told him. Alec felt frozen in place. So what he had eaten before really was a human liver. His bottom lip trembled, and the man offered over the scalpel. Go on. I already marked the area, so you will see where to cut, and she won't be waking up any time soon, the man told Alec, ushering him toward the table. Was he really going to do this? Cut up an innocent woman all for youth? Now, standing over her, he couldn't help but have a smile twitch at the corner of his mouth. I'm sorry, he whispered, before making the first cut to continue his eternal youth. The face that wouldn't leave. Late one eerie night, while scrolling through my computer files, I stumbled upon an inexplicable image. A face, contorted into a disturbing grin. Its eyes seemed to follow me, an unsettling gaze frozen in pixels. As the clock ticked towards midnight, an unsettling aura enveloped the room, and the face in the photo began to morph, its expression shifting into a spectrum of malevolence. Sleep became a distant memory as the haunting face etched itself into my consciousness. Attempts to rid my computer of the unsettling image proved futile. Every delete only intensified its presence. Shadows in my room took on the twisted form of that unsettling grin, and hushed whispers echoed tales of a forgotten spirit trapped within the digital realm. The more I tried to distance myself, the more the face embedded itself into my reality. It wasn't just a photo anymore. It was a malevolent force, seeping into every corner of my existence. I found myself tormented by a spectral presence, an entity that transcended the boundaries between the digital and tangible worlds. In the silence of the night, that creepy face seemed to come alive, a phantom lingering in the pixels. It became an unwelcome companion, a relentless nightmare that refused to be erased. The once innocuous image now held a grip on my sanity, a reminder that some discoveries in the digital realm should remain undisturbed. If only I could turn back time and unsee that haunting face that has now become an indelible mark on my consciousness. Cemetery Road. Flashing lights through a heavy comforter of muggy summer air. 5:12 a.m. No knife. No gun. Kid, listen. Where were you last night when this boy was killed? A group of cops and teenagers standing over the hill of the cemetery by the road. We had ditched him, officer. We thought it would be funny. We just ran off over the hill towards our cars. When we didn't see him come running after us like the chicken we thought he'd be, we went back to see where he was. One of the friends rambled on to the cop. Well, kids, we need to know how this boy was killed. A teenage girl jumped into the conversation, shaking, unable to keep calm. His name is Briggs Douglas, not this boy. We went up the hill to see him. She stopped dead in her tracks, unable to say any more. The teens all looked towards the horizon of the hill, all afraid to say for themselves what had happened. The cops tried to see where they were looking. Realizing the teens weren't going to move, one officer started ominously walking up the hill. A couple more officers followed quickly to catch up. The first officer stopped at the top of the hill, stunned. A boy in a red plaid shirt, faded blue jeans, a sideways hat, and shaggy desert dust-colored hair, hanging by the center tree, the body swinging still. An officer's hands slowly tightened into fists as he charged towards the circle of teenagers. Who did that to him? The officer angrily accused. We don't know. We weren't even on the grounds when he was killed, another teenage boy defended. Stop yelling. We didn't do it, the unstable teenage girl screamed. Seymour Town Hall, 1949. You are charged with the murder of Sergeant Tomlinson. I didn't kill him. I barely even knew the man. Hookman, how do you plead? Innocent. He's guilty, stood Head Police Chief Douglas. I must have been framed, Selectman Manweiler, replied Hookman. Selectman Manweiler hesitated. Meeting adjourned. The next trial for Hookman will be 4 o'clock on the Tuesday of next week. Great Hill Cemetery, Cemetery Road, Seymour, Connecticut, 1949. Click, click, click. Hookman is walking up and down the same line on his kitchen tiles, his arms hanging lifeless at his sides, his head hanging heavy, looking towards the floor, and his shoulders following, hunched. He thought to himself, trying to figure out a way to get out of this accusation. His thoughts were interrupted by a gust of wind pushing his curtains open, making the hairs on his arms stand up. A few birds were exchanging conversation right outside his window. I didn't do it, Hookman responded, yelling to the birds. The chirping ceased, as if offended. Fluttering wings flew off to the nearest evergreen. Annoyed, Hookman sat on his wooden kitchen chair. I don't even know Sergeant Tomlonsky. I must have been framed. I had got to be. I didn't do it. Why would I do it? But who would have framed me? Hookman exhaled. His focus escaped to the outside hill. On the peak of the incline stood 3 trees. 2 evergreens and a common tree with branches as tall as him, an oak or maple in the middle of the 2 pines. A dark thought entered his mind. There's no way I can get out of this. No one will believe me. I can't prove I'm innocent. They don't believe me when I say I didn't know him. I have no proof. They'll kill me for sure. He slowly stood up, and his motivation grew stronger as he strode to his shed. He rummaged to find a thick rope. He slowed down his steps and was deep in thought as his hands fiddled to make the circle. There's no way to get out of this. Is there no way to get out of this? He boots glued to the grass, hands still. There really is no proof, no confession, no way to get out of this. Hookman rolled his eyes and took a deep breath. They're gonna kill me anyway, sooner or later. He walked toward his door, closed it lightly until he heard it click shut. He walked to the oak or maple tree, tied the rope to the closest branch that was as tall as himself, and put his head in the circle. He took a deep breath, assuring himself that this was the only way. Realizing he had no one to say goodbye to, he let his body drop, his limbs twitching, until he hung still. Not even the birds on the evergreen would bother him this time. Flashing lights through a heavy comforter of muggy summer air. 5:12 a.m., no knife, no gun. A flock of police officers, teenagers, and detectives, all standing on the lower half of the cemetery grounds, calmer than before. A detective assistant taking pictures of the teens in sight with his iPhone. A coroner and 2 police officers walk up the hill towards the top of the cemetery grounds, where a boy's body hangs swinging 50 feet away. Intending on taking the body down and covering it with a white sheet, the 3 men walk, normally, towards the center tree. At the point where they were about 15 feet away, they could see the teen's body clearly, suspiciously still swinging perpetually. An officer called down the hill to another cop to come up. The 3 officials took a few steps forward, looking at the ground for evidence. The 3 simultaneously gazed upward to see a half-transparent man, with a troubled, melancholy frown, holding Briggs Douglas's forearm, swinging his hanging corpse. Black-eyed children haunt my town. In the quiet town of Ravens Hollow, nestled between thick woods and forgotten memories, there was a pervasive sense of unease that clung to the air like a thick fog. I moved to this small, seemingly idyllic town for a fresh start, but little did I know that Ravens Hollow harbored a dark secret that would consume me. The first night in my new home was unsettling. The creaking of the ancient floorboards echoed through the empty halls, and shadows danced on the walls as if they had a life of their own. I dismissed it as the usual adjustment to a new environment, but the unease lingered. As weeks passed, the town revealed its sinister nature. Locals spoke in hushed whispers about the legend of the black-eyed children. They were said to be spectral figures that roamed the outskirts of Ravens Hollow, seeking entry into the homes of unsuspecting victims. Supposedly, they appeared as ordinary children, but with pitch-black eyes that reflected the void of their malevolent souls. One stormy night, as the wind howled outside, I heard a soft knocking at my front door. When I opened it, 2 children stood on my porch, their faces obscured by the hood of their tattered jackets. Water dripped from their matted hair, and their eyes were as black as the abyss. "May we come in?" they whispered in unison. A chill ran down my spine, but curiosity compelled me to invite them inside. The air grew heavy as they entered, and an oppressive silence enveloped the room. I offered them blankets and warmth, but they remained unnervingly silent. As the night wore on, strange occurrences unfolded. Objects moved on their own, and the temperature plummeted, despite my efforts to keep the fireplace blazing. The children never spoke, yet their presence seemed to command the malevolent forces that now gripped my home. Desperation drove me to seek answers from the townsfolk, but their faces grew pale when I mentioned the black-eyed children. "Leave this place," they warned, their eyes reflecting the same terror that haunted mine. Unable to escape the nightmare, I decided to confront the children. In the dead of night, guided only by flickering candlelight, I ventured into the woods where the legend began. The trees whispered secrets, and the wind carried haunting melodies as I approached an ancient, dilapidated mansion hidden among the shadows. In the mansion's decaying halls, I discovered a room adorned with eerie paintings depicting the black-eyed children. The air thickened with an otherworldly energy, and a haunting voice echoed, "You cannot escape their gaze." Terrified, I stumbled upon a hidden cellar door. As I descended into the abyss below, I uncovered the town's darkest secret, a ritual that bound the spirits of the black-eyed children to Ravens Hollow. The town's inhabitants, driven by an insatiable fear, had willingly sacrificed their souls to keep the malevolent force contained. I realized that I, too, was destined to become a part of this cursed cycle. The children's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt the tendrils of their darkness enveloping me. Ravens Hollow had claimed another victim, and the legend of the black-eyed children continued to weave its sinister tale, leaving the town forever shrouded in an eternal nightmarish silence. Don't fall asleep. Hundreds of customers come through the store each day. None have ever made me feel the way this guy did. I find myself writing this to keep track of events, though I'd be perfectly happy if no more unfold. I work in a gas station, and on my second week, I was asked to cover the night shift for Thursday and Friday. I hate to admit this, but I can be a bit of a suck-up when it comes to my jobs. I wanted to get off on a good foot, so I accepted. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about it, though. It was one of those conversations where the moment you turn away, you wish you hadn't agreed. I wouldn't tell you this if it didn't have some sort of relation to the story. But I'm a very anxious person. I take medication for it, and as of the last 2 days, I've been out. Now, if you've never taken drugs like this, stopping abruptly for any reason can cause some pretty unpleasant side effects. Drowsiness, insomnia, and nausea are the main ones, although some people, including me, can sometimes see things. Sort of like with sleep paralysis, a figure or creature or blob can show up, even if for just a few seconds. For me, it's always when I'm half asleep or exhausted, but it's always the same thing. A man. The man in the corner of the room. He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He watches. And when I blink, sometimes he's gone. Sometimes he's closer. So it's best I take my fucking pills. The late night shift was pretty pleasant for the first few hours. It was slightly busy for a while, but as midnight came closer, the people in the shop trickled out. While kneeling down behind a shelf to restock, I remember hearing the front door swing open, though I didn't register that someone was in the shop until the motion chime played. At this point, I had been stalking for hours, running on nothing but soda and 2 of those prepackaged burgers, so I was relying on autopilot to get me through the night. I made my way behind a front counter and noticed the time, 1:32 a.m. I remember sighing to myself, chin resting on my palm. I was exhausted once again. I checked the cameras, and to my surprise, nobody was on them. I know I heard the chime, and so I leaned forward and really studied the cameras. It was at this point, the first sign of something strange going on, that I started to feel uneasy. I disregarded this, and in fact, I recall being sort of upset with myself. It was just a kid, or maybe someone forgot their wallet and went back out for it. Those were the things I said to ease my mind when I noticed something in one of the cameras that I hadn't seen before. A black figure standing in the corner of the store. My heart dropped into my stomach, and my eyes darted up towards that corner to see if there was someone there. Nothing. There were 2 things I thought it could be. My mind was playing tricks on me, and instead of being in my room, my brain just put him wherever it could. Or there was just a guy wearing black in the store, and I was just being paranoid. I heard the door open earlier, but I never saw the person walk in. The weight of dread kept me in the chair, despite wanting to check. I remained in the safety of my little room at the front. It's the kind with the plastic wall covering and a door on the side, so I felt mostly protected there. Out of nowhere, somebody begins walking down one of the aisles and makes his way to me. "You're new," he said. He wasn't holding anything to buy. Now my internal alarm is blaring, but I tried to stay polite and told him it was my first night shift and added that I was a little nervous about it. The moment I let those last 3 words slip off my tongue, he smiled. "Oh, I bet." He didn't move. The man stood there for what felt like way too long. I thought that maybe he had a mental illness of some kind, but there wasn't anyone there with him to aid him. Maybe he didn't have anybody. "I live right out by the woods back there, you know." He pointed behind me. I wasn't sure what to say to this. "It's a short trip then, huh?" A few moments went by in silence. "Can you show me where the chips are?" I pointed to the aisle they were on, and his smile disappeared. He snatched a bag of the chips and stared at it for a few seconds before setting it back down. He didn't speak another word to me, but he looked angry. Once he left, I looked at the cameras set up outside and saw him. He was staring at the camera. I couldn't look away, but after a few moments he left, walking out toward the way he pointed earlier. What I didn't understand was why he asked me to show him where the chips were. He said I was new, as if he was familiar with the shop, or at least the employees, but none of my coworkers had ever heard of this guy, or at least they couldn't remember him based on my descriptions. It was obvious that he wanted me to leave the safety of that room, but why? I'm glad I didn't find out. The rest of the night, I sat watching the monitors, searching for any signs of him. I sort of expected him to. And I had even thought of letting the cops know. But he hadn't done anything, so they couldn't help. He never showed up again on the cameras. Honestly, I'm starting to think the whole thing was just in my head, and that this may have been my first real hallucination, caused by my lack of medication lately. This didn't feel like one, though. It was as real as any other encounter I'd ever had. Maybe that means it's getting worse. I suppose that's what makes a hallucination truly terrifying. The inability to distinguish whether what you're looking at is real or just in your head.